Have you ever been unfairly blamed for something you didn't do time and time again until you start to question if anyone will ever listen to your side of the story? I used to work at a small sandwich shop in a busy neighborhood. It wasn't a big franchise or anything fancy, just a humble little place where people came for their quick lunch fix. The staff was mostly made up of women from the Indian community, all of whom had long, thick, jet black hair that seemed to flow like a waterfall down their backs. It was almost like a defining feature of the team. And then there was me. I was different in more ways than one. For starters, my hair was a medium length, nothing too long, but certainly not short either. And the color? It was a soft brown shade, something that stood out a little but wasn't exactly eye-catching in a crowd. Compared to the rest of the team, I was the odd one out, physically distinct in an environment where uniformity seemed to be the norm. This difference, as it would turn out, was both a blessing and a curse. From day one, I did my best to fit in and do my job well. I kept my hair neatly tied back and always wore a hairnet while working to maintain hygiene standards. I was punctual, attentive, and genuinely cared about delivering good service. But no matter what I did, there was an invisible line drawn between me and the other salon that seemed to widen every time a customer complained. You see, this sandwich shop had a recurring issue that none of us could seem to fully fix. Occasionally, customers would report finding long strands of black hair in their food. Now, this was a serious problem not only because it was unpleasant for customers, but also because it reflected poorly on the cleanliness and professionalism of the shop. What was baffling, however, was that every single time this happened, my boss without fail would immediately point the finger at me. No questions asked, no investigation made, just straight-up blame, as if I was some kind of scapegoat. It didn't matter that the hair was always black, and my hair was not. It didn't matter that I was the only one who kept her hair tied up and covered with a net. Somehow, I was the one who had to carry the burden of every complaint, no matter how baseless or unfair it was. At first, I tried to reason with my boss. I explained that it couldn't have been my hair because I was always careful to keep it secured. I reminded him that the other employees had long black hair the exact same color as the hair found in the sandwiches. But my words fell on deaf ears. His suspicion wasn't just stubborn, it felt personal. It was incredibly frustrating and disheartening. Imagine working hard every day, following the rules, only to be accused repeatedly without proof. It felt like I was being singled out simply because I looked different. The unfairness of the situation made me feel powerless, like I was trapped in a narrative I couldn't escape. As the days went on, this cycle of blame began to wear me down. The stress wasn't just about the job anymore, it was about being treated unjustly and not being trusted. It's one thing to face challenges at work, but it's another thing entirely to be wrongly accused and disregarded by your own boss. That's when I realized I had to take matters into my own hands. But before I tell you how I did it, let me paint a clearer picture of the environment I was in where this strange blend of cultural similarity and subtle difference set the stage for a drama I never expected to be a part of. The shop was a tight-knit community, and everyone knew each other well. The Indian women who worked there often bonded over their shared culture and experiences. Their long black hair wasn't just a physical trait, it was almost a symbol of their identity within the team. They joked, shared stories, and supported each other like a small family. Meanwhile, I stood a little apart not because anyone was openly hostile, but because I simply didn't quite fit the mold. My medium-length brown hair was just one visible difference. There were subtle cultural nuances, language barriers, and an unspoken distance that made me feel like an outsider. That environment, while friendly on the surface, was the backdrop against which my boss's accusations kept happening. So here I was, a young woman, working hard, trying to belong, yet repeatedly blamed for something that wasn't my fault. It was a classic case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, with the wrong hair color. Little did my boss know, I wasn't going to let this go. What happens when you're blamed repeatedly for something you didn't do, no matter how much you prove your innocence? Well, that's exactly what I experienced every single day at that sandwich shop. Almost every day, without fail, a complaint would come in, "There's a hair in my sandwich." The phrase itself is enough to make any food worker cringe. Hygiene is everything in the food industry, and a single hair in a meal can cause serious damage to a restaurant's reputation. But what made it even worse for me was that the hair was always described as long and black, exactly the kind of hair my coworkers had. Naturally, my boss would look at me first, his eyes narrowing as if I was guilty even before I opened my mouth. "Was it your hair again?" he'd ask sharply, cutting me off before I could respond. No, it can't be mine, I'd say. My hair is brown and it's tied up under a net. It's impossible. But the boss never seemed to care. It didn't matter how many times I explained or showed him the hairnet tightly securing my hair. It didn't matter that the evidence didn't match me. The moment a customer complained about black hair, I was the one who got blamed. One time, a customer returned to the shop, clearly upset, holding a sandwich and pointing to a single, long black strand sticking out. The boss immediately called me over in front of everyone and said, "This is your responsibility. Fix this." I tried to defend myself, explaining calmly that my hair was brown and that I always kept it tied up. But he brushed it off. He didn't even ask the other staff members if their hair matched. He didn't check the security cameras or review any other possible sources. This wasn't an isolated incident. Another day, I was cleaning the counters, carefully avoiding any loose strands of hair. I saw one of my coworkers, a long-haired woman, adjusting her ponytail without a hairnet. A few minutes later, a customer complained about finding hair in their order again. When I mentioned that maybe it wasn't my hair this time, the boss snapped, "Stop making excuses. It's always you." The unfairness stung deeply. I remember one afternoon when the boss called me into his office. He was visibly annoyed. "This has happened too many times," he said. "If it keeps happening, I might have to reconsider your position here." I was shocked. I had worked hard, always followed the rules, and yet here I was, being threatened because of something that wasn't my fault. It was a constant cycle of blame and denial, and I felt powerless to break free from it. At work, this tension hung over me like a cloud. Every time a new complaint arrived, my heart would race, knowing I'd be the first suspect. It wasn't just about the job anymore, it was about my dignity and fairness. I talked to some of my coworkers about it. Some sympathized quietly, while others just avoided the topic altogether. The cultural gap and the tight-knit nature of the team made it difficult for me to feel fully accepted. I was treated as an outsider, and this blame only reinforced that feeling. On one occasion, a colleague even whispered to me, "Maybe you should just quit if it's causing you so much trouble." But quitting wasn't an option. I needed this job, and I wanted to prove that I wasn't the cause of the problem. So, what did I do? I kept my head down, continued to follow all hygiene protocols meticulously, and tried to ignore the growing frustration in my chest. Yet, with each complaint, the boss's accusatory tone grew sharper. Once, after a particularly harsh incident, I stayed late to clean the kitchen thoroughly. I even took pictures of my hair tied back with the net in place, hoping to somehow prove my innocence to my boss or management. But it never made a difference. It was like being trapped in an endless loop where the truth didn't matter, only the scapegoat. On another occasion, a customer came in complaining loudly about a hair in their food, and the boss immediately called me out in front of all the staff and customers. I felt humiliated and embarrassed, standing there while everyone stared. Trying to speak up, I said, "My hair isn't even black, it's brown, and it's covered with a hairnet." But the boss waved me off with a frustrated sigh and said, "Enough. You're the only one it could be." That moment was a breaking point for me. I realized this wasn't just a workplace issue, it was becoming personal. The constant blame was poisoning my work environment and my peace of mind. I started to dread coming to work, worrying about when the next accusation would come. And yet, no one else seemed to face the same scrutiny. Even when other employees made mistakes, I was the one who got singled out. The unfairness was suffocating. I tried to talk to the boss one last time, hoping to clear the air. "Please," I said, "I'm not the problem here. Can we investigate this properly? Look at the facts, not just assumptions." But he shook his head and said, "I'm tired of excuses. This has to stop, or you will have to find another job." Feeling trapped and desperate, I knew I had to find another way to prove my innocence. I needed to show, without a doubt, that it wasn't my hair causing the problem. It was then that an idea started to form in my mind, a bold, unconventional plan that would turn the tables and finally give me the upper hand. After enduring endless blame for something I didn't do, after feeling powerless and frustrated every single day, I finally decided it was time to take control of the situation. I knew that no amount of explanation or proof would convince my boss simply refused to see the truth. So, I needed a way to prove once and for all that the hair found in the customer's food could not possibly be mine. The idea hit me one evening as I sat at home, exhausted and fed up. If my brown hair was being mistaken for black, what if I changed it to a color that was unmistakably different? Something bold, something impossible to confuse with anyone else's hair. The decision was simple: I would dye my hair blue. It wasn't a rash choice, it was a strategic move, a kind of silent rebellion and clever retaliation all at once. I bought the dye, prepared everything carefully, and the next day after work, I sat down in front of the mirror and transformed my appearance. The blue hair looked striking, vibrant, and completely unlike anything the sandwich shop had seen before. It was impossible to mistake it for black, or brown for that matter. I felt a surge of empowerment, a tangible way to say, "You can't blame me anymore." When I came into work the next morning, I noticed the immediate reactions. The other employees stared at me in surprise, some whispering and exchanging curious glances, but the most important reaction was my boss's. He barely recognized me at first, his eyes widening as he took in the bold blue hair. For the first time, I saw hesitation in his expression instead of the usual immediate suspicion. And then it happened. Just like before, a customer came in, upset and complaining loudly about finding a hair in their sandwich. The boss called me over, eyes flashing with irritation, ready to place the blame on me again. But this time, I was prepared. I calmly pointed to my blue hair, stating clearly, "That hair can't be mine. Look, my hair is blue." His reaction was priceless. His confident, accusatory tone faltered, and I could see the surprise mixed with frustration. How could he blame me now? The usual immediate blame was broken. In the following days, it became clear that my blue hair had changed the dynamics. Whenever a hair complaint arose, the boss no longer jumped to conclusions about me. Instead, he hesitated, second-guessed, and in some cases, stopped blaming me altogether. My bold action disrupted the cycle of unfair accusations and made it impossible for him to scapegoat me without proof. The blue hair was more than just a color change, it was a symbol of my refusal to be a victim. It was a small but powerful act of defiance and self-respect. Suddenly, I felt in control again, like I was reclaiming my dignity and standing up against injustice without confrontation. It was smart, silent, and effective. My coworkers started to notice the shift too. Some of them smiled at me, others quietly admired my courage. Even the customers, when they saw me confidently working with my bright blue hair, seemed to look at me differently, not as the easy target, but as someone who had taken her stand. Of course, the boss still tried to hold on to old habits. Occasionally, he would glance suspiciously in my direction, looking for any excuse. But with blue hair that couldn't be confused for black, his attempts were transparent and weak. This act of dyeing my hair blue wasn't just about avoiding blame, it was about reclaiming power in a place where I had been made to feel powerless. It showed me that sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or confrontation, but smart creative action that forces the other side to rethink their behavior. In the end, the blue hair did more than just stop the blame game. It taught me a valuable lesson about standing up for myself in a world where I was often misunderstood and underestimated. It was a reminder that sometimes the boldest moves come not from shouting the loudest, but from changing the game entirely. One busy afternoon, as usual, the sandwich shop was buzzing with activity. Suddenly, a man walked in with a stern expression, his face tight with displeasure. His demeanor immediately caught everyone's attention. He looked like someone who wasn't going to let the situation slide. Moments later, he returned a sandwich, pointing angrily at a long black hair tangled within the bread and fillings. "This is unacceptable," he said loudly, drawing the eyes of every employee and customer in the shop. The boss, almost on autopilot, rounded up all the staff and ordered them to gather around. "Who's responsible this time?" he barked, eyes narrowing as he scanned the group. Without hesitation, he pointed at me, as if it were an obvious truth. "It's her again. I told you before, she's the one who keeps letting this happen." But this time, I didn't react with panic or defensiveness. I calmly stepped forward and said clearly, "Sir, this cannot be my hair. I have dyed my hair blue. And it's not just a color, my hair is cut shorter now and has a slight wave from curling." I gestured to my vibrant blue hair, which contrasted starkly with the long, straight black hair in the customer's sandwich. The room fell silent. The boss blinked, momentarily caught off guard, but quickly recovered and rolled his eyes. Before he could respond, the customer furrowed his brows, glaring directly at me. "This is a basic small matter," he said sharply, raising his voice. "How could something this simple happen repeatedly? It's beyond careless. Everyone looked around, surprised by the intensity of his tone. No customer had ever complained about the personal conduct of the employees, only about finding hair in their food. Then, the customer's tone shifted, becoming calm but laced with sharp suspicion. "Look at this hair, it's long, black, and clearly not hers. Why would you blame this young woman with blue hair?" He turned to face the boss now, voice rising slightly in disbelief. "Do you have a problem distinguishing colors? Or is there some kind of grudge against her? Or are you trying to get your friends or relatives hired by getting rid of her?" His words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. The boss's face flushed with embarrassment and fury. His jaw tightened as the customer continued, "It's obvious you're scapegoating her without evidence. That's unfair and unprofessional." The staff and customers watched, stunned by this rare public challenge to the boss's behavior. I stood quietly, relieved yet tense, as the atmosphere shifted from tense accusation to awkward confrontation. For the first time, the boss was being called out not just by me, but by an authority figure who refused to accept baseless blame. The customer's piercing gaze locked onto the boss's eyes. "If you can't identify the source of this problem properly," he said firmly, "then maybe you're the one who should reconsider your management." The boss opened his mouth as if to reply, but found himself speechless, caught off guard by the directness and boldness of the man's remarks. It was a moment of reckoning. The employees exchanged looks of hope and disbelief. Could this be the turning point? Had the tide finally shifted in my favor? The customer then lowered his voice and said more quietly but with equal firmness, "Mistakes happen, but blaming someone without cause repeatedly is unacceptable. It destroys trust, morale, and fairness." This wasn't just about a hair in a sandwich anymore. It was about justice and respect in the workplace. The boss looked away, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The man's presence and words forced a new reality in that small sandwich shop: a demand for truth, fairness, and accountability. It was clear that the old ways of scapegoating would no longer be tolerated, and the balance of power was starting to shift. The boss's face burned with embarrassment as the customer's sharp words hung heavily in the air. Being publicly reprimanded in front of his staff and customers was a blow to his pride, and the sting made his temper flare uncontrollably. His eyes narrowed, fists clenched at his sides, but he was at a loss, couldn't defend his unjust accusations convincingly. Instead, he lashed out, his voice trembling with anger as he turned back toward me. "So, apart from the hairs in the sandwiches, now you want to cause me personal trouble too?" he snapped bitterly. "Is that what this is about?" His words cut through the tense silence like a knife, unfair and baseless. Despite knowing this wasn't my fault, I lowered my gaze quietly, a heavy mix of sadness and reluctant sympathy washing over me as I saw him crumble under the customer's criticism. But the boss wasn't finished. His frustration morphed into a disingenuous calm as he turned to the customer, voice dropping to a softer, more conciliatory tone. "I apologize, sir, and I hope you'll understand. I will gladly replace your sandwich. I'll make sure to address the issue properly." He glanced around nervously, then added, "Next time, please just come in to enjoy your meal. There's no need to call all the staff together like this. We have many other customers to serve." The customer only smiled slightly, unmoved by the polite deflection. "I'm not here for pleasantries," the customer replied steadily. "I want this problem fixed today, but more importantly, I want you to arrange a transfer to the Texas branch immediately. Because here, in Washington, this store needs a more professional manager." He reached into his pocket and calmly pulled out a business card, handing it to the boss. The card read, "Senior Manager Regional Operations of the Sandwich Chain." I felt a rush of surprise and quiet hope swell inside me. This was a powerful momentone that turned the entire situation on its head. The boss, now caught between humiliation and regret, lowered his head in silent acceptance. I sensed deeply the weight of his realization. This mistake of his, the constant unjust blame, could have cost him his job altogether. Yet this senior manager was offering him a chance to stay on, albeit far away, in a distant branch. The unspoken message was clear: the boss's leadership here was no longer welcome. The customer's gaze then shifted back to me, sharp and serious. "Tomorrow, dye your hair back to a natural color," he said firmly. "No more flashy colors. I need a manager who looks professional, not a hairstylist trying to make a statement. And more importantly, I want you to know this. Starting tomorrow, you have full authority to run this store." I expect you to take responsibility and make sure no more hair ends up in sandwiches." His tone was no longer just authoritative, but almost like a command. Then he swept his eyes across the rest of the employees, all the Indian women with their long black hair. His expression was one of suspicion, clearly implying that the source of the hair problem might lie with them. It was an unspoken challenge hanging in the Iran invitation for change and accountability for everyone. This was the moment everything shifted. I stood there, a mix of relief and determination flooding through me. The emotional roller coaster of blame, injustice, and frustration was finally turning into empowerment and hope. The customer's words weren't just about hair and sandwiches, they were about fairness, responsibility, and leadership. And for the first time, I felt the balance had truly begun to tip in my favor. The senior manager looked at me with a firm yet encouraging expression. "Go ahead and ring me up," he said calmly. "I have things to attend to, and you go home right now. Dye your hair back to a natural color, buy some new clothes, and start showing yourself as the boss you are. You need to be someone who can truly lead and inspire your team." His words felt like a fresh breeze after weeks of tension, doubt, and isolation. For the first time in a long time, I felt a genuine spark of hope and renewal. The heaviness that had clouded my days seemed to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. Yet, despite the relief and joy, a bittersweet feeling lingered within me. I had only wanted to prove that the black hair wasn't mine, that I was not the scapegoat for the careless mistakes happening around me. I hadn't expected things to end with the old boss being quietly sent away, or with me suddenly entrusted with running the store. It was a lot more responsibility than I had anticipated, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. But I knew one thing. I wouldn't let this moment slip away. This was my chance to make things right for myself and for everyone in that shop. I bowed slightly to the senior manager, a quiet gesture of respect and gratitude. Then, I turned to one of my coworkers and asked her to ring up his purchase. As I watched the manager leave, I felt a quiet dignity settling over the shop. Then, gathering my courage, I looked at my former boss. "I'm sorry this happened," I said sincerely. "I hope you take this as a lesson and do well in your new position." He said nothing, simply turning and walking into his office to pack up his things. I let out a deep breath, a mixture of relief and nervous anticipation flooding through me. The weight of the past weeks had lifted, but a new challenge lay ahead. Suddenly, I was the one in charge, responsible for the team and the store's reputation. I knew I had a lot to learn and prove, but for the first time, I was ready to face it head-on. This experience taught me that standing up for yourself with courage and clarity can shift even the most unfair situations. It reminded me that leadership is not just about authority, it's about fairness, respect, and earning trust. And above all, it showed me that sometimes, change comes when you least expect it, turning obstacles into opportunities. From now on, I was determined to lead with strength and fairness, ensuring that no one else would be unfairly blamed or silenced. This was more than just a job, it was a chance to build a better workplace, one honest decision at a time.